Chapter 1. A Shocking Murder. Before the collapse, the wind howled across the Devonshire cliffs, tugging at the hem of Lady Elellanena Ashwood's emerald gown as she stood at the edge of the unfinished bridge. Below, the river churned, a restless serpent of foam and shadow. The Ashwood Bridge, her late husband's grand vision, was to be a marvel of engineering, linking the estate to the village across the gorge. Tonight, it was little more than a skeleton of iron and ambition, its beams swaying faintly in the gale. Lady Eleanor's silhouette was a stark contrast to the chaos, poised, unyielding, her silver hair glinting under the storm lanterns strung along the scaffolding. It was the last night anyone saw her alive. The scream came just after 10, sharp and fleeting, swallowed by the wind. The guests at Ashwood Manor, gathered for the bridge's ceremonial opening the next morning, barely stirred. A log shifted in the drawing-room hearth. Glasses clinked. Lord Percival Ashwood, Eleanor's eldest son, paused mid-sentence, his cigar trembling between his fingers. "Did you hear that?" he muttered, but his wife, Clara, waved a dismissive hand. "The wind, darling. It's been shrieking all evening." Only Miss Violet Grayson, the governess, rose from her seat by the window. Her thin frame tensed as she pressed a hand to the glass, peering into the dark. "That wasn't the wind," she said, her voice a thread of unease. The others exchanged glances, some amused, some irritated, but no one moved. Not until the footman burst in, his face ashen, his boots streaked with mud. "She's gone," he stammered. "Lady Eleanor, out there on the bridge. She's dead." The room erupted. Chairs scraped against the parquet floor. Lord Percival dropped his cigar, the ember sizzling against the rug. Clara clutched her pearls, her breath hitching. Dr. Julian Hargreaves, the family physician, pushed past the others, his medical bag already in hand. "Stay here," he barked, though no one obeyed. They spilled out into the night, a tangle of silk and tweed, their lanterns casting wild arcs of light across the lawn. The bridge loomed ahead, its iron lattice groaning under the storm's assault. Lady Eleanor lay crumpled at its centre, her gown fanned out like spilled ink. A single lantern flickered beside her, its glass cracked. Blood pooled beneath her head, dark and glistening, seeping into the wooden planks. Dr. Hargreaves knelt, his fingers brushing her wrist. "No pulse," he said, his voice clipped. "She's been struck. Hard. This wasn't a fall." A gasp rippled through the group. Clara swayed, clutching her husband's arm. "Struck," she whispered. "You mean murdered?" "Undoubtedly," Hargreaves replied, rising. His coat flapped as he scanned the bridge. No sign of a weapon, though. The wind might have carried it off, or someone did. Lord Percival's face hardened. "Nonsense! Who dare? This is Ashwood land, our land." His voice cracked, betraying the tremor beneath his bravado. He turned to the footman. "Fetch the constable, now!" Miss Grayson lingered at the edge of the group, her arms crossed tightly. "She was alone," she murmured, almost to herself. "I saw her leave the house not 20 minutes ago. She said she needed air." "Then how?" Clara began, but a low rumble cut her off. Chirp, ground shivered beneath their feet. A crack split the air, sharp as a gunshot, and the bridge shuddered. Iron screeched against iron. The far end of the structure buckled, planks splintering as they plunged into the gorge below. The guests stumbled back, shouting, as the collapse swallowed half the bridge in a cloud of dust and debris. Lady Eleanor's body remained, teetering on the edge of the broken span, her lantern rolling to a stop against a beam. "God in heaven," Lord Percival breathed, his hand raking through his hair. "The bridge, her bridge. It's a miracle we weren't on it," Hargreaves said, his tone grim. He glanced at the body, then at the jagged drop. Or perhaps not a miracle. The constable arrived an hour later, a stout man named Inspector Japp, his moustache bristling with indignation. He surveyed the scene with a scowl, barking orders to his men to cordon off the area. "A murder and a collapse in one night," he muttered, kicking a loose stone into the abyss. "This'll be a devil of a case. Too many variables. Wind, structural failure, foul play. We'll need more than luck to sort it." Miss Grayson stepped forward, her voice steady despite the pallor of her cheeks. "There's someone who could help," she said. "A detective, a Belgian. He's staying at the inn in the village. I've heard of him. Hercule Poirot." Japp snorted. "A foreigner. What's he got that I haven't?" "Order, Shakes," replied simply, "and a mind sharper than most." Lord Percival turned, his eyes narrowing. "Poirot, you say? I've heard the name. Something about a case in London. A theft, wasn't it? Very well. Send for him. If Mother's been murdered, I want the bastard caught." The footman was dispatched into the night, his lantern bobbing as he vanished down the path. The wind keened, tugging at the wreckage, and the guests retreated to the manor, their shadows stretching long and thin. Lady Eleanor remained where she'd fallen, a silent sentinel on the doomed bridge, her secrets locked within the storm. Inside, the fire had dwindled to embers. Clara sank into an armchair, her hands trembling as she sipped a brandy. "Who could have done this?" she whispered. "And why now, with the opening tomorrow?" Dr. Hargreaves set his bag on the table, his fingers drumming against the leather. "Perhaps the bridge itself holds the answer," he said, "or someone who didn't want it finished." Miss Grayson stood by the window, her reflection faint against the glass. She said nothing, but her lips pressed into a thin line. The clock struck 11, its chime swallowed by the gale outside. Somewhere in the village, a certain Belgian detective stirred from his sleep, unaware that a summons was racing toward him through the dark. Chapter 2. The Gathering of Suspects. Shadows in the Manor. The storm battered Ashwood Manor through, the small hours rattling the leaded windows and sending draughts curling beneath the doors. Inside, the drawing-room had become a cage of restless energy. The guests, now suspects, paced or sat in uneasy silence, their faces etched with exhaustion and suspicion. The fire sputtered, casting jagged shadows across the oak-panelled walls. Inspector Japp stood by the hearth, his notebook open, his pencil tapping a staccato rhythm against the page. "Right," he said, his voice cutting through the murmur. "Let's have it, then. Who saw what and when?" He fixed Lord Percival with a stare, but the man barely looked up from the brandy glass cradled in his hands. "I've told you," Percival said, his tone flat. "I was here with the others. When the scream came, I didn't see a blasted thing until we found her." He took a sharp sip, the liquid glinting amber in the firelight. Japp's moustache twitched. "And you, Mrs. Ashwood?" He turned to Clara, who perched on the edge of a velvet settee, her fingers twisting a lace handkerchief. "I heard the wind," she said, her voice brittle. "Nothing more until that awful cry. I thought it was a fox at first. There are so many in the woods this time of year." Her eyes darted to her husband, then away, as if seeking an anchor. The inspector scribbled a note, then shifted his gaze to Dr. Hargreaves. The physician leaned against the mantel, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. "I was pouring a sherry when it happened," he said. "By the time we reached the bridge, she was beyond help. You saw the wound, clean, deliberate. A blow from behind, I'd wager." Japp nodded, though his frown deepened. "And you, Miss Grayson?" He tilted his head toward the governess, who stood apart from the others, her back to the window. The glass reflected her pale face, framed by the dark beyond. "I saw her leave," Violet said, her words measured. "She crossed the lawn alone toward the bridge. She carried no lantern then, only her shawl. I thought she'd be back in a moment." Her fingers brushed the curtain's edge, a faint tremor in the motion. The room stilled as Japp scratched, another line in his notebook. "So she went out alone, and 20 minutes later she's dead. Convenient timing for someone." He snapped the book shut, the sound sharp as a gavel. "Anyone else leave the room after her?" A chorus of denials followed, too quick, too firm. Japp's eyes narrowed, but before he could press further, the door creaked open. The footman stepped in, rain dripping from his coat, his breath uneven. "He's here," he said. "Monsieur Poirot." All heads turned as a small, impeccably dressed figure entered behind him. Hercule Poirot paused in the doorway, his patent leather shoes gleaming despite the mud outside. His moustache, waxed to precise points, framed a face both stern and serene, and his green eyes swept the room with the calm of a man who missed nothing. He carried a silver-topped cane, which he tapped lightly against the floor as he stepped forward. "Bonsoir," he said, his voice soft yet commanding. "I am Hercule Poirot. I understand there has been a tragedy. A most unfortunate one, non?" He inclined his head toward Japp, who bristled slightly but offered a curt nod. "Murder, more like," Japp said. "Lady Elellanena Ashwood, bashed on the head, and half the bridge gone with her. A mess, if you ask me." Poirot's lips curved faintly, not quite a smile. "A mess, perhaps, Inspector, but not without order. There is always order, even in chaos, if one knows where to look." He turned to the group, his gaze lingering on each face. "And you, mes amis, were all here when this chaos began?" Lord Percival straightened, setting his glass on the table with a clink. "We were, all of us, until that scream dragged us out into the night." "Dragged, you say?" Poirot's eyebrows lifted. A curious choice of word, and yet not all are so easily dragged, I think. He stepped closer to the fire, warming his hands. "Tell me, who was this Lady Elellanena to you all? A mother, oui, to Monsieur Percival, but to the rest?" Clara's handkerchief stilled. "She was formidable," she said, choosing her words with care. "A woman of strong opinions. She ran this estate like a general after Sir Henry died. Opinions make strong enemies," Poirot mused. He glanced at Hargreaves. "And you, Doctor, a physician to the family, I presume?" "Since Sir Henry's time," Hargreaves replied, his tone clipped. Lady Eleanor trusted me with her health and her confidences. Poirot nodded, then turned to Miss Grayson. And you, mademoiselle? A governess. Yet you speak of this detective with such certainty. Why? Violet met his gaze, unflinching. I've read of your work, Monsieur Poirot. A mind like yours sees what others miss. And tonight we need that. Flattery, Poirot said, a glint in his eye, is a dangerous thing, but useful. He clasped his hands behind his back. Now, I must see this bridge, this scene of disorder. Inspector, if you please, Japp grunted, leading the way. The group trailed behind, their footsteps uneven on the polished floor. Outside the wind had eased, leaving a damp chill that clung to the skin. The bridge, or what remained of it, jutted into the darkness, a broken spine of iron and wood. Lady Eleanor's body had been moved to a tarp near the edge, covered with a sheet. Poirot knelt beside it, lifting the fabric with care. His fingers hovered over the wound, a single deep gash at the base of her skull. Précis, he murmured. A strike of intent, not passion. He stood, brushing his gloves against each other, and scanned the wreckage. A splintered plank caught his eye, its edge stained dark. He bent again, peering at it, then straightened without comment. "Anything?" Japp asked, impatience edging his voice. "No," Poirot said. "But not yet everything." He turned, back to the manor, his cane tapping a steady rhythm. The night grows late, and the mind must rest to see clearly. Tomorrow, mes amis, we begin in earnest. As they returned to the house, Miss Grayson lingered a moment, her eyes on the bridge. A faint creak echoed from the ruins, and she shivered. Inside, Poirot paused by the drawing-room door, watching the others disperse. His fingers brushed his moustache, and a shadow of a thought flickered across his face. Gone as quickly as it came. Chapter 3. Poirot arrives. The little grey cells awaken. The morning broke over Ashwood Manor with a reluctant dawn. The sky, bruised grey that mirrored the mood within. Mist clung to the cliffs, softening the jagged outline of the broken bridge. Hercule Poirot stood at the edge of the lawn, his overcoat buttoned to the chin, his breath forming faint clouds in the chill. The storm had left its mark. Twigs littered the grass, and a torn ribbon from Lady Eleanor's shawl fluttered against a hedge. He bent to retrieve it, twirling the silk between gloved fingers before tucking it into his pocket. Order, he murmured to himself, is the foundation of all things. His eyes traced the path from the manor to the bridge, noting the muddy prints, some fresh, some blurred by last night's chaos. A faint smile touched his lips. And disorder, it tells its own tale. Inspector Japp approached, his boots squelching in the damp earth. "Sleep well, did you?" he asked, his tone gruff but curious. "Not much rest for me. Too many questions rattling about." Poirot inclined his head. "The mind? It does not sleep when there is work to be done, Inspector. But the body, it must be persuaded." He tapped his cane against a stone. "You have examined the bridge this morning?" "First light," Japp said, jerking a thumb toward the wreckage. "My men found nothing new. Bits of wood, twisted metal, and that blood-stained plank you spotted last night. No weapon, though. Could have been anything. A rock, a tool, even a bit of the bridge itself." "Could have been," Poirot echoed, his voice soft. "But was it?" He stepped onto the remaining span, his movements deliberate, as if testing each plank's resolve. The iron groaned faintly beneath his weight. He paused where Lady Elellanena had fallen, crouching to study the spot. The blood had dried into the wood, a dark halo against the grain. His fingers hovered over it, then withdrew. Japp shifted impatiently. "Well? Any of your famous deductions yet?" Poirot rose, brushing his gloves together. "A deduction, Inspector, is not a flower to be plucked too soon. It must ripen." He turned, his gaze sweeping the manor's windows. A curtain twitched in one, too quick to identify the watcher. But I observe this. The blow was swift, precise. The killer knew where to stand, how to strike. This was not a moment of rage. Japp scratched his chin. "Planned, you mean? That narrows it down, or widens it, depending on who's got a grudge." "Précisément," Poirot said. He stepped off the bridge, gesturing toward the house. "Let us return. The scene, it speaks, but the people, they whisper louder." Inside, the drawing-room smelled of stale smoke and tension. The suspects had gathered again, their faces drawn from a sleepless night. Lord Percival stood by the window, arms crossed, staring at the bridge as if it might confess. Clara sat with a teacup, its contents untouched, the saucer trembling faintly in her lap. Dr. Hargreaves flipped through a medical journal, though his eyes barely moved across the page. Miss Grayson perched on a stool near the piano, her hands folded tightly. Poirot entered with a quiet flourish, setting his cane against the wall. "Mes amis," he began, his tone warm yet edged, "I thank you for your patience. A crime such as this, it is a puzzle, no? And I, Hercule Poirot, am here to fit the pieces." Lord Percival turned, his jaw tight. "Fit them quickly, then. I want this over. Mother deserves that much." "Quickly?" Poirot's eyebrows lifted. "Non, monsieur. The truth, it does not hurry. It reveals itself in its own time." He paced slowly, his shoes clicking against the floor. "But let us begin with the simple things. Madame Ashwood." He faced Clara, who flinched slightly. "You spoke of a fox last night. Tell me, did you hear this fox before or after the scream?" Clara blinked, her fingers tightening on the saucer. "Before, I think." "Yes, before. It was a sharp yelp, out in the woods." Poirot nodded, then turned to Hargreaves. "And you, Doctor, pouring your sherry. A precise man, I see. Where was your glass when the scream came?" Hargreaves closed his journal with a snap. "I on the table half full. I'd just set it down when we heard it." "Half full," Poirot repeated, as if tasting the words. He moved to Miss Grayson. "And you, mademoiselle, watching from the window. You saw Lady Elellanena leave. Did she pause, look back, speak to anyone?" Violet's lips parted, then closed. "No," she said at last. "She walked straight to the bridge. Her shawl caught the wind. That's all I remember." Poirot clasped his hands behind his back. "Bon, a picture begins to form, but it is incomplete." He turned to Japp, who lingered by the door. "Inspector, the bridge, was it inspected before last night? A structure so grand, it must have been." Japp frowned. "The engineer, Mr. Tate, was here yesterday. Said it was sound, ready for tomorrow's opening." "Sound?" Poirot mused. "And yet it fell." He tapped a finger against his chin. "I should like to speak with this Monsieur Tate. And the servants, those who move unseen, they see much. Lord Percival bristled. The servants! They wouldn't dare. Dare is not the question, Poirot interrupted gently. Truth is. He retrieved his cane, his gaze sweeping the room once more. I will return soon, mes amis. The little grey cells, they must stretch their legs. As he stepped into the hall, a faint clatter came from upstairs. A dropped tray, perhaps. Poirot paused, his head tilting, then continued towards the servants' quarters. Behind him, the drawing-room buzzed with hushed voices. Clara set her, teacup down, the porcelain rattling. Hargreaves reopened his journal, though his fingers gripped the edges too tightly. Miss Grayson rose, crossing to the window, her shadow merging with the mist outside. On the lawn, Japp caught up with Poirot. "You're a queer one," he said, half admiring, half exasperated. "What's all this about foxes and sherry glasses?" Poirot smiled faintly. "Details, Inspector. The truth hides in them, like a pearl in an oyster." He glanced back at the manor, its silhouette looming through the fog. "And this oyster, it has many layers." Chapter 4. Initial Interviews. The threads begin to tangle. The servants' quarters of Ashwood Manor hummed with a quiet tension, the air thick with the scent of damp wool and coal dust. Hercule Poirot stood in the narrow hallway, his cane resting against a worn table as he adjusted his gloves. A young maid, Ellen, her apron still dusted with flour, shifted nervously before him, her hands twisting a rag. "Merci, mademoiselle," Poirot said, his voice a soothing balm. "You will tell me, please, what you saw last night, before the tragedy." Ellen's eyes flicked to the floor. "I was in the kitchen, sir, kneading dough for the morning. Lady Elena came through, quick-like, not stopping. She took her shawl from the peg and went out the back door. Didn't say a word." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Quick, you say? Not her usual manner, perhaps?" "No, sir," Ellen replied, her voice barely above a whisper. She was, always so steady. Last night she seemed rattled." "Rattled," Poirot repeated, his green eyes narrowing. "Bon. And after she left, did anyone follow?" Ellen shook her head. "Not that I saw, but I heard the door again, a minute or two later. Didn't look, too busy with the bread." Poirot nodded, retrieving his cane. "You have been most helpful, mademoiselle. The bread, it will be excellent, I am sure." He turned toward the stairs, his steps measured, the maid's words turning in his mind like gears. Back in the drawing-room, the suspects had dispersed slightly, though the air remained taut. Lord Percival stood by the fireplace, poking at the embers with a brass rod. Clara lingered near the tea-tray, pouring a fresh cup with unsteady hands. Dr. Hargreaves sat in an armchair, his journal abandoned on his lap, while Miss Grayson traced the edge of the piano keys without pressing them. Inspector Japp hovered near the door, watching Poirot's return with a mix of scepticism and curiosity. Poirot clapped his hands lightly, drawing their attention. "Mes amis, a moment, if you please. The picture, it grows clearer, but the colours, they are not yet in place." He faced Lord Percival first, his tone polite yet firm. "Monsieur, your mother, she was, I understand, the heart of this bridge. Tell me, who opposed her vision?" Percival's grip tightened on the poker, the metal scraping against the grate. "No one worth mentioning." he said, his voice clipped. The villagers grumbled, said it had ruined the cliff's beauty, but they wouldn't dare touch her. And Tate, the engineer, swore it was sound. Swore, Poirot echoed, tilting his head. A strong word, and you believed him. Of course, Percival snapped, then softened. He's the best in Devonshire. Mother trusted him. Poirot nodded, turning to Clara. Madam, you poured tea this morning with such care, yet your hands, they tremble. Is it the shock alone, or something more? Clara's cup clinked against its saucer as she set it down. It's a dreadful thing, Monsieur Poirot, seeing her like that. I keep hearing that scream. Her eyes darted to her husband, then back to her lap. Naturellement, Poirot said, his tone gentle. But the scream, it came after the fox, oui? Or perhaps during? Clara hesitated, her brow furrowing. After, I think. Yes, after. She rubbed her temple. It's all a blur. Poirot's gaze shifted to Hargreaves. Doctor, a man of science, you observed the wound. A blow from behind, you said. Did Lady Eleanor ever speak to you of fear? Of enemies? Hargreaves leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. She was cautious, not fearful, he said. Kept her troubles close. Last week, though, she mentioned a letter, something that unsettled her. She didn't say more. A letter, Poirot murmured, his fingers brushing his moustache. Most interesting. He turned to Miss Grayson, who met his look with a steady gaze. And you, mademoiselle, the shawl caught the wind, you said. Did you see it when we found her? Violet's hands stilled on the piano. No, she said slowly. It was gone. I hadn't thought of it until now. Précisément, Poirot said, a glint in his eye. The small things, they vanish, and yet they speak. He paced a few steps, then stopped. Inspector, this Monsieur Tate, where is he now? Japp straightened. In the village, I'd wager. Stayed at the inn last night after his inspection. I can fetch him. Bon, Poirot said. I should like to hear his oath of soundness myself. He glanced at the group, his expression unreadable. And one more thing. Did any of you hear a door, a creak, a step, after Lady Eleanor left? Silence fell thick and heavy. Percival's poker stilled. Clara's breath caught. Hargreaves' fingers tapped once against his journal. Violet's eyes flicked to the ceiling, then away. No, Poirot said, his voice soft as silk. Curious. The house, it is not so quiet as that. He retrieved his cane, tapping it lightly against the floor. I will take a walk, Inspector, to see this village, this inn. The air, it clears the mind. As he stepped into the hall, Japp followed, muttering, Doors and shawls. What's that got to do with a murder? Everything, Poirot replied, his smile faint. Or nothing. We shall see. Outside the mist had lifted slightly, revealing the bridge's twisted remains. Poirot paused, his gaze lingering on a glint of metal half buried in the mud, a buckle perhaps, or a tool. He bent to examine it, then straightened without touching it, his lips pursing. The village lay a mile down the winding path, its chimneys puffing smoke into the grey. Behind him, the manor loomed, its windows like eyes watching his every step. Inside, Clara rose abruptly, her teacup clattering. He's too clever, she whispered to Percival, who grunted in reply. Hargreaves flipped open his journal, scribbling a quick note. Violet crossed to the window, her fingers brushing the glass where the curtain had twitched earlier. a shadow moved upstairs, brief, silent, and the house settled back into its uneasy hush. Chapter 5. The First False Lead. A convenient culprit. The village of Ashwood lay nestled in a hollow, its cobblestone streets slick with morning damp. Smoke curled from the chimneys of the Black Swan Inn, where Hercule Poirot paused to brush a speck of mud from his shoe. His cane clicked against the stone as he entered, the low hum of conversation dying at the sight of him. A barmaid glanced, up from wiping a glass, her brow furrowing, but Poirot offered only a polite nod before scanning the room. Inspector Japp stood by the hearth, speaking to a wiry man in a tweed cap. Mr. Harold Tate, the engineer. Tate's hands fidgeted with a rolled blueprint, his face flushed beneath a scruff of beard. His eyes darted to Poirot as the detective approached, a flicker of unease crossing his features. "Monsieur Tate," Poirot said, his voice smooth as velvet. "I am Hercule Poirot. You are the man who built the bridge. Oui." "Designed it," Tate corrected, his tone sharp. "The labourers built it. And it was sound, perfectly sound, until last night." He unrolled the blueprint on the table, jabbing a finger at the lines. "See here, reinforced beams, proper load calculations. I checked it myself yesterday afternoon." Poirot leaned over the plans, his green eyes tracing the ink. "A fine work, I am sure. And yet it fell. Most curious, no?" He straightened, tapping his cane lightly. "Tell me, when did you last see Lady Elena?" Tate's fingers stilled. "Yesterday, around 4. She came to the site. Wanted to see the progress. We spoke briefly, then I left for the inn." "Briefly," Poirot echoed. "And what did she say?" "She was pleased," Tate said, his voice tightening. "Said it'd be her legacy, that's all." He rolled the blueprint again, his knuckles whitening around it. Japp stepped forward, his moustache bristling. "That's not all, is it, Tate? My constable found something this morning, near the bridge." He produced a small evidence bag, holding it up. Inside gleamed a heavy wrench, its head crusted with dried blood. "Yours, I take it? Your initials, HT, are scratched on the handle." The room tensed. The barmaid set her glass down with a clink, and a farmer at the bar turned to stare. Tate's face drained of colour. "That's mine, he stammered. "But I left it at the site yesterday. Anyone could have taken it." "Anyone," Japp said, his tone hard. "Or you. You were there. You had the tool. And now Lady Eleanor's dead with a cracked skull. Sounds like a case to me." Poirot raised a hand, his expression calm. "A moment, Inspector. Monsieur Tate, you say you left this wrench at the site. Where, précisément?" Tate swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing. "By the tool chest, near the east pylon. I locked it up before I left. Always do. And yet it was found in the mud." Poirot mused, his gaze drifting to the bag. "Unlocked, I presume?" Japp nodded. "Loose, about 10 yards from where she fell. Could have been tossed there after the deed." Tate's voice rose, edged with panic. "I didn't toss anything. I was here all night. Ask the innkeeper. I had a pint, then went to bed. Didn't leave till morning." The innkeeper, a stout man with a red nose, shuffled forward. "True enough," he said. "He was in the tap room till 10, then upstairs. Didn't hear him go out." Japp crossed his arms. doesn't mean he didn't sneak out later. The bridge is a short walk. Plenty of time to slip over, do the job, and get back before the scream. No, Poirot interjected, his voice firm yet quiet. The scream. It came just after 10. The innkeeper confirms Monsieur Tate was here until then, and the maid at the manor, she heard the door a minute or two after Lady Eleanor left. The timing, it does not fit so neatly. Japp scowled. Close enough. He's got motive too. Word is, Lady Eleanor was pushing him hard, threatening to cut his pay if the bridge wasn't ready. Maybe he snapped. Tate shook his head fiercely. I'd never! She was tough, aye, but fair. I needed that job. Why would I ruin it? Poirot's fingers brushed his moustache, his eyes narrowing. A question worth asking, Inspector. And another. If Monsieur Tate struck her, why leave his own wrench to be found? A man so precise with his blueprints, he would not be so careless, I think. Japp hesitated, then grunted. Maybe he panicked. Either way, he's coming with me. We'll sort it at the station. He signalled to a constable, who stepped forward to take Tate's arm. The engineer protested, his voice rising, but the constable let him out, the blueprint falling to the floor with a soft thud. Poirot watched them go, his expression unreadable. He bent to retrieve the plans, smoothing them with care. A convenient culprit, he murmured, but convenience, it is not always truth. The barmaid approached, her voice low. He's a good man, sir. Worked himself ragged on that bridge. Doesn't seem the type. Poirot inclined his head. The type, mademoiselle, is often a mask, but I thank you. He turned to Japp, who lingered by the door. Inspector, I will return to the manor. There are threads here, loose ones, that must be pulled. Japp shrugged. Suit yourself. I've got my man. Let's see if he cracks. As Poirot stepped outside, the wind carried a faint creak from the distant bridge. He paused, his gaze settling on the cliffs. The wrench, the timing, the motive, it all pointed to Tate, yet something gnawed at him. He tapped his cane against the cobblestones, then started up the path, the manor's silhouette rising through the mist. Back at Ashwood, the news of Tate's arrest spread quickly. Lord Percival paced the drawing-room, his face flushed. The engineer! Good riddance! Mother! Should have sacked him months ago. Clara twisted her handkerchief. It's over, then. We can put this behind us. Dr. Hargreaves looked up from his chair, his tone dry. If Japp's right, I've seen men cornered. They don't always confess. Miss Grayson stood by the window, her arms crossed. He didn't seem angry yesterday, she said quietly. Nervous, perhaps, but not violent. The room fell silent, each suspect lost in their thoughts. Upstairs, a floorboard creaked, soft, deliberate, and the sound went unnoticed by all. But the walls, Chapter 6, the psychological game, shadows of doubt. The afternoon sun struggled through the clouds, casting a pale glow over Ashwood Manor. Hercule Poirot stood in the drawing-room, his hands clasped behind his back, his silhouette framed against the tall windows. The suspects had gathered once more, summoned by his quiet insistence, their faces a gallery of unease. Inspector Japp had returned from the village, his confidence buoyed by Tate's arrest, though a flicker of doubt lingered in his eyes. "Petit ami," Poirot began, his voice a gentle ripple in the tense air. "The good inspector believes the case is closed, Monsieur Tate, with his wrench and his nerves, is the answer, no? He paused, letting the words settle. And yet, I wonder, Lord A. Percival leaned against the mantel, his fingers drumming a restless rhythm. Wonder all you like, he said, his tone sharp. If Jap's satisfied, that's enough for me. The man's a menace, always was. Poirot's eyes glinted. A menace, monsieur? Strong words for an engineer who built your mother's dream. Tell me, did she ever speak of him with such disdain? Percival's drumming stopped, his hand curling into a fist. She didn't suffer fools, he said curtly. Tate was late with his plans more than once. She let him know it. Bon, Poirot said, turning to Clara. She sat on the settee, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her eyes fixed on a spot on the rug. Madame, you wished this to be over, but if Monsieur Tate is guilty, why do you not relax? The shadow, it still hangs over you, no? Clara's head snapped up, her lips parting. I don't know what you mean, she stammered. It's been a shock, that's all. I can't stop seeing her out there. Her voice trembled and she pressed a hand to her mouth. Poirot nodded, his expression softening. Naturellement, the mind, it clings to such images. He moved to Dr. Hargreaves, who sat with his legs crossed, a faint smirk playing at his lips. And you, Doctor, a man of calm. You do not seem convinced by this arrest. Why? Hargreaves shrugged, the smirk fading. I've seen guilt, Monsieur Poirot. Tate's a nervous sort, but not a killer. The blow was too clean, too deliberate, for a man in a panic. Précisément, Poirot said, a spark of approval in his tone. He turned to Miss Grayson, who stood near the piano, her posture rigid. Mademoiselle, you spoke of Tate's nerves yesterday. Did he seem a man capable of such precision? Violet's fingers brushed the piano's edge, then stilled. No, she said quietly. He was flustered, kept checking his watch, muttering about deadlines. But he didn't strike me as cold. Poirot clasped his hands, pacing a slow circle. A picture emerges, mes amis. A wrench, yes. A motive, perhaps. But the hand that wielded it, that is less clear. He stopped, facing them all. Let us imagine for a moment that Monsieur Tate is not the one, that the killer stands among us now, listening, watching. What would such a person do? The room froze. Percival's fist unclenched, his eyes narrowing. Clara's breath hitched, her gaze darting to her husband. Hargreaves's smirk vanished, replaced by a tight-lipped stare. Violet's hand dropped from the piano, her knuckles whitening. Jap shifted uncomfortably. What's this, Poirot? You're stirring them up for nothing. Tate's in custody. Case closed. Closed? Poirot's eyebrows lifted. Non, Inspector. A door may be shut, but it is not locked until the key fits. He tapped his cane against the floor. I propose a small experiment. Let us return to the bridge together. The scene, it may speak again. Reluctantly, they followed him outside. The air was crisp, the mist thinning to reveal the bridge's jagged remains. Poirot led them to the edge, where the blood-stained plank still lay. He knelt, his gloved hand hovering over it, then pointed to a faint mark. A scuff, barely visible in the wood nearby. Regardez, he said. A shoe, perhaps. Too small for Monsieur Tate, I think. He wears the heavy boots of a workman. This is finer, more delicate. He stood brushing his gloves together. And the wrench, found 10 yards away. Thrown, yes, but by whom? Percival snorted. You're grasping at straws, Poirot. A scuff proves nothing. Perhaps, Poirot said, his tone mild. But straws, they build a nest. He turned to Clara. Madame, you wear such fine shoes, non? May I see? Clara paled, stepping back. I don't see why that matters, she said, her voice rising. I wasn't out here, not until after. Of course, Poirot said, raising a placating hand. A simple curiosity. He glanced at Hargreaves. And you, Doctor, your shoes, they are polished yet practical. A man who walks much, perhaps? Hargreaves' eyes narrowed. I walk when I must. What's your point? No point, Poirot said, smiling faintly. Only observation. He turned to Violet. Mademoiselle, your boots, they are sturdy. Oui, for teaching children in the gardens. Violet nodded, lifting her skirt slightly to reveal plain scuffed leather. They're old, she said. Nothing delicate about them. Poirot stepped back, his gaze sweeping the group. Bon, the mind, it begins to work. Let us return. There is tea, I hope. The little grey cells, they thrive on such comforts. They trudged back to the manor. Japp muttered, You're playing a game, Poirot. What's the use of it? The use, Inspector, Poirot replied, is to see who flinches. He glanced over his shoulder, noting Clara's hurried steps, Percival's clenched jaw, Hargreaves' steady stride, and Violet's lingering pause by the bridge. A breeze rustled the grass, and a faint glint caught his eye. Something metallic, half buried near the path. He made no move to retrieve it, but his lips curved slightly. Inside, the tea was poured, though few drank. Clara excused herself, claiming a headache, and retreated upstairs. Percival lit a cigar, the smoke curling thickly around him. Hargreaves resumed his seat, his fingers tapping a slow beat. Violet lingered by the window, her reflection sharp against the glass. Poirot sipped his tea, his eyes half closed. A game, yes, he murmured to himself, but the players, they do not yet know the rules. Upstairs, a door clicked shut, and the house held its breath. Chapter 7. Another crime or major reveal. The letter surfaces. The late afternoon draped Ashwood Manor in a heavy stillness, the light filtering through the windows in muted streaks. Hercule Poirot sat in the drawing-room, a teacup balanced on his knee, his eyes tracing the intricate pattern of the rug. The suspects had scattered. Clara upstairs, Percival in the study, Hargreaves in the library, and Violet somewhere in the gardens, leaving the air thick with unspoken questions. Inspector Japp lingered by the hearth, flipping through his notebook with a restless energy. A sudden clatter broke the quiet. Footsteps pounding down the stairs. Ellen, the maid, burst into the room, her face flushed, a crumpled envelope clutched in her hand. "Sir, Monsieur Poirot, I found this," she gasped, thrusting it toward him. It was in Lady Eleanor's room, tucked under the blotter on her desk. "I didn't mean to snoop. I was dusting, and it fell out." Poirot set his cup down with care, taking the envelope. The paper was thick, cream-coloured, its edges worn. Lady Eleanor's name was scrawled across the front in a hurried, angular script, no return address. He turned it over, noting the broken wax seal, then glanced at Japp. "Inspector, you will permit." Japp nodded, leaning closer. Go on then. What's it say? Poirot slid out a single sheet, unfolding it with a delicate touch. The ink was black, the words sharp and uneven. He read aloud, his voice steady. Eleanor, you think you can bury the past, but it's clawing its way up. The bridge won't stand, and neither will you. I know what you did. Pay, or I tell all. A hush fell, broken only by the faint crackle of the fire. Japp snatched the letter, his eyes scanning it again. Blackmail, he said, his tone grim, and a threat. This changes everything. Poirot reclaimed the paper, his fingers brushing the creases. We, Inspector, a new thread in our tapestry. He turned to Ellen. Mademoiselle, when did you last see Lady Eleanor at her desk? Ellen bit her lip. Yesterday morning, sir. She was writing. Looked cross, like something was bothering her. I didn't see her touch that letter, though. Bon, Poirot said, dismissing her with a nod. She curtsied and fled, the door clicking shut behind her. He paced a few steps, the letter dangling from his hand. A secret, a price, and a bridge that falls. Most intriguing. Japp rubbed his chin. This could be Tate, pushing for more money, or someone else entirely. Either way, it's motive, and a damn good one. Perhaps, Poirot said, his tone measured. But the bridge, it is mentioned. A warning or a promise? He tapped the paper against his palm. We must gather them again, Inspector. The letter, it will stir the pot. Within minutes the suspects reassembled, drawn by Japp's barked summons. Percival stormed in first, his cigar trailing smoke. What now? He demanded, his eyes narrowing at the letter in Poirot's hand. Clara followed, her face pale, a shawl draped loosely over her shoulders. Hargreaves entered with a book under his arm, his expression guarded. Violet slipped in last, her boots leaving faint traces of garden soil on the floor. Poirot held up the letter, letting it catch the light. Mes amis, a discovery. Words from the shadows, addressed to Lady Eleanor. He read it aloud again, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. Who is this I wonder? And what past did she bury? Percival's cigar trembled, ash falling to the rug. Nonsense, he snapped. Mother had no secrets worth killing over. Some crank trying to scare her, nothing more. Clara's shawl slipped, her hands clutching at it. A threat, she whispered. She never said. She always seemed so strong. Strength hides much, Poirot said, his gaze shifting to Hargreaves. Doctor, she spoke to you of a letter last week. Was this the one? Hargreaves set his book down, his fingers flexing. I don't know, he said. She didn't show it to me, just said it upset her. I told her to burn it if it was trouble. Burn it, Poirot repeated, his eyebrows lifting. And yet she kept it. Why? Violet stepped forward, her voice low. She was stubborn. If someone threatened her, she'd face it, not run. Her eyes flicked to the letter, then away. Poirot folded the paper, tucking it into his pocket. A stubborn woman, oui, and a secret worth dying for, perhaps. He turned to Japp. Inspector, this we must find them. A name, a shadow, a clue. Japp nodded, scribbling in his notebook. I'll have my men ask around the village, see if anyone's heard of an R with a grudge. Tate's still in custody, but this muddies the water. Précisément, Poirot said. The water? It is muddy indeed. He glanced at the group, noting Percival's flushed cheeks, Clara's trembling fingers, Hargreaves' steady stare, and Violet's quiet tension. One of you, I think, knows more than you say. The past, it has a voice, no? No one answered. Percival stubbed out his cigar with a grunt. Clara rose, murmuring about needing air, and slipped into the hall. Hargreaves picked up his book, flipping it open with deliberate calm. Violet crossed to the window, her breath fogging the glass. Poirot watched them go, then turned to Japp. I will walk again, Inspector, to the bridge. The letter, it speaks of collapse. I must listen. Outside the air was sharp, the bridge a skeletal ruin against the fading light. Poirot paused at the edge, his cane sinking slightly into the mud. He bent, retrieving the glint he'd seen earlier. A small silver clasp, engraved with a faint R. His lips curved, and he slipped it into his pocket beside the letter. At the manor, Clara stood in the hall, her shawl trailing on the floor. She didn't notice the shadow that moved behind her, silent as a whisper, before vanishing up the stairs. Chapter 8. Poirot's Hidden Clue. The silent witness, twilight, settled over Ashwood Manor, the sky a deep bruise streaked with fading gold. Hercule Poirot stood alone on the broken bridge, the wind tugging at his overcoat as he surveyed the wreckage. The blood-stained plank lay where it had fallen, its edges splintered, but his attention drifted elsewhere, to the iron beam beside it, bent and twisted from the collapse. He crouched, his gloved fingers tracing a faint scratch along its surface, a shallow, curved mark, too precise for a random scar. Curieux, he murmured, his breath misting in the chill. He pulled the silver clasp from his pocket, the one engraved with an R, and held it against the scratch. The curve matched, as if the clasp had snagged there, torn free in a struggle. His eyes narrowed, and he tucked the clasp away, rising with a soft hum. Back at the manor, the drawing-room buzzed with restless energy. Inspector Japp had returned from the village, his notebook bulging with scribbled names. None yet a clear R. The suspects sat in a loose circle, their faces etched with fatigue. Lord Percival slouched in an armchair, a fresh cigar smouldering between his fingers. Clara perched on the settee, her shawl pulled tight, her eyes red-rimmed. Dr. Hargreaves stood by the bookshelf, flipping a coin absently between his knuckles. Miss Grayson lingered near the door, her hands clasped behind her back. Poirot entered, his cane tapping a steady rhythm. "Mes amis," he said, his voice cutting through the murmur. "The day grows long, and the truth, it draws near. Inspector, your search for this R, what have you found?" Japp shrugged, snapping his notebook shut. "Not much. A baker named Roger, but he's half blind and harmless. A widow, Ruth, who hated the bridge, too old to swing a wrench. Though, Tate's still the best bet, R or not." "Best bet," Poirot echoed, his tone mild. "A phrase for the races, no? But this is no game of chance." He paced to the window, gazing at the bridge's silhouette. "The letter spoke of a past, a secret Lady Elena buried. Tell me, Monsieur Percival, what did your mother fear most?" Percival exhaled a plume of smoke, his eyes narrowing. Fear? She didn't fear anything, least of all some scribbled threat. She'd have laughed it off. Laughed, Poirot said, turning to face him. And yet she kept the letter. A woman who laughs does not hide such things under her blotter. He shifted to Clara. Madame, you knew her strength. Did she ever speak of a burden? An old wound, perhaps? Clara's shawl slipped, her fingers fumbling to catch it. She mentioned regrets once, she said, her voice barely audible. Years ago, after Sir Henry died, something about a promise broken. I thought it was grief. Regrets, Poirot mused, his gaze drifting to Hargreaves. Doctor, you held her confidences. A promise broken. Does this stir a memory? Hargreaves caught the coin mid-flip, his hand closing around it. She was private, he said, his tone clipped. If she broke a promise, she never told me. But she was restless lately. Kept checking the post. Restless, Poirot repeated, nodding. He turned to Violet. Mademoiselle, you saw her daily. A woman of regrets. Did she seem haunted? Violet's lips pressed into a thin line. Not haunted, she said, determined. She'd stare at the bridge sometimes like it was more than stone and steel. I never asked why. Poirot clasped his hands behind his back. Bon, a woman of strength, of secrets, of determination. And yet she fell. He paused, letting the words hang. I have walked the bridge again, mes amis. It whispers if one listens, a mark, a small thing overlooked. It tells me the killer was close, very close, when the blow was struck. Japp straightened, his interest piqued. A mark? What kind? Poirot smiled faintly. A detail, Inspector, one I keep for now, like a card unplayed. He tapped his temple. The little grey cells, they work best in silence. Percival stubbed out his cigar, his voice rough. More riddles, Poirot? If you've got something, say it. Patience, monsieur, Poirot said, his tone firm. The truth, it is a delicate thing. Rush it, and it shatters. He glanced at the group, noting Clara's quick intake of breath. Hargreaves' tightened grip on the coin. Violet's subtle shift toward the door. But I will say this. The bridge did not fall alone. It had help. The room stilled. Japp's notebook slipped slightly in his hand. Help, he said. You mean sabotage? Perhaps, Poirot said, his eyes glinting. Or perhaps a consequence. We shall see. He retrieved his cane, moving toward the door. I will rest now, Inspector. The mind, it must digest. As he stepped into the hall, a faint creak sounded from the stairs. Soft, deliberate. Poirot paused, his head tilting, then continued to his room. Behind him, the drawing-room erupted in hushed voices. Percival muttered about foreign nonsense. Clara rose, her shawl trailing as she hurried upstairs. Hargreaves pocketed his coin, his gaze lingering on the window. Violet slipped out, her footsteps fading toward the garden. In his room, Poirot locked the door and sat at the small desk. He laid out the letter and the clasp, studying them under the lamplight. The scratch on the beam, the curve of the clasp, the threat of collapse. It wove a thread he could almost grasp. He leaned back, his fingers steepled, and closed his eyes. Close, he whispered, very close. Outside the wind picked up, rattling the bridge's remains. A shadow moved across the lawn, swift, silent, before vanishing into the dusk. In the manor, Clara stood at her bedroom window, her hands pressed to the glass. Hargreaves paced the library, his coin flipping again. Violet knelt in the garden, her fingers brushing a patch of disturbed earth. The night deepened, and the house held its secrets tight. Chapter 9. The Final Gathering. The web tightens. The evening descended over Ashwood Manor with a quiet menace, the air heavy with the promise of rain. Hercule Poirot had summoned the suspects to the drawing-room once more, his note delivered by Ellen with a simple instruction. 8 o'clock. All must attend. The clock now struck the hour, its chime echoing through the oak-panelled walls as the group assembled, their faces a mix of dread and defiance. Poirot stood by the fireplace, his small frame commanding the room. His overcoat was gone, replaced by a pristine suit, his moustache waxed to perfection. The silver-topped cane rested against the mantel, and in his hand he held the crumpled letter and the silver clasp, their edges catching the firelight. Inspector Japp leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, his notebook tucked away but his eyes sharp. The suspects sat or stood in a tense semicircle. Lord Percival by the window, Clara on the settee, Dr. Hargreaves near the bookshelf, and Miss Grayson by the piano. "Mes amis," Poirot began, his voice soft yet piercing, "the time has come to untangle this web. A woman is dead, a bridge is broken, and a secret festers among us. Tonight we find the truth." Percival shifted, his voice rough. "Get on with it, then. I've had enough of your games." "Games?" Poirot's eyebrows lifted. "Non, monsieur. This is order, the order of the mind." He held up the letter. "We begin here. A threat, a demand, signed R. Lady Eleanor was to pay, or her past would be revealed. What past, I asked myself, and who knew it? Clara's hands tightened on her shawl, her knuckles pale. "She was a good woman," she said, her voice trembling. "Whatever it was, it's not worth this." "Good, perhaps," Poirot said, "but not without shadows." He paced a step, the clasp glinting in his hand. Then the bridge. A marvel, oui, but it fell. Monsieur Tate swore it was sound, yet it collapsed after the murder. A coincidence? I think not. Hargreaves leaned forward, his tone dry. "You're suggesting sabotage. Prove it." "Patience, Doctor," Poirot said, his gaze steady. "The proof, it builds." He turned to the group. "Let us walk through the night. Lady Eleanor leaves the manor. Rattled, says the maid. She takes her shawl, crosses to the bridge. 20 minutes later, a scream. Then the collapse. But the blow, it was precise from behind. The killer was close. Japp straightened. "And Tate's wrench?" "Oui, Inspector," Poirot interrupted. "The wrench. Found 10 yards away, marked with his initials. Too convenient, I thought. A man of blueprints does not leave such a trail." He held up the clasp. "But this was found near the bridge. A small thing, torn free, and on the beam a scratch, curved like this clasp. The killer struggled, non?" Violet's eyes widened slightly, her hands clasping tighter. "A struggle? She didn't seem hurt, beyond the blow." "Précisément," Poirot said, nodding. "The blow was the end, not the beginning. She fought briefly, and something was lost." He set the clasp on the mantel beside the letter. Now, the timing. The scream came after 10. Tate was at the inn, seen by many. But the maid heard a door minutes after Lady Eleanor left. Someone followed. Percival snorted. "The servants hear all sorts of nonsense. Wind creaks." "Non," Poirot cut in, his voice firm. "This was no wind. It was a step, a purpose." He paced again, his eyes sweeping the room. "And the bridge, why did it fall?" I examined the wreckage. The east pylon, it was weakened, not by time, but by force. A tool, perhaps, struck it hard. The collapse was no accident. Clara gasped, her shawl slipping. "You mean someone planned it?" "Oui, madame," Poirot said. "The murder, the collapse, they are one act." He stopped, facing them all. "But who? Who knew her secret? Who bore the R?" Hargreaves crossed his arms. "You're fishing, Poirot. That clasp could be anyone's." "Could be," Poirot said, his smile faint. "But it is not." He tapped his temple. "The little grey cells, they see the pattern. The letter spoke of a past buried. The bridge, her legacy, was to rise above it. Someone wished to bury both." Violet stepped forward, her voice low. "You think the killer's here, among us?" "Oui, mademoiselle," Poirot said, his gaze locking with hers. "And they listen now, wondering how much I know." He turned to Jap. "Inspector, the wrench, it was thrown, yes? But the scuff mark I showed you, too small for Tate's. Boots, a finer shoe, I said, and the clasp. It matches no coat in this house. It is personal." Jap frowned. "Personal? You're saying it's one of them?" "Patience," Poirot said, raising a hand. "We are close." He faced the group again. "Let us consider motive. Monsieur Percival, your mother's death leaves you the estate. Madame Clara, did her strength chafe you? Dr. Hargreaves, her confidences, did they bind or burden? Mademoiselle Grayson, did her determination clash with your own?" The room bristled. Percival's face reddened. "You dare!" "I dare," Poirot said, unflinching, "because one of you dared more." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "The past, it is the key. A promise broken, a secret kept, and the bridge, it was the symbol." Clara rose, her voice shaking. "I can't listen to this." She fled to the hall, her footsteps echoing. Percival glared, his fists clenched. Hargreaves watched with a cold stare, his coin forgotten. Violet remained still, her eyes on the clasp. Poirot turned to Jap. "Inspector, tomorrow we finish this. The truth, it waits." He retrieved his cane, stepping toward the door. "Bonne nuit, mes amis. Sleep, if you can." As he left, the fire sputtered, casting long shadows. Jap muttered, "He's got something, damn him." The suspects dispersed. Percival to the study, Hargreaves to the library, Violet to the garden. Upstairs, Clara locked her door, her breath ragged. Outside, the bridge creaked in the wind, its secrets teetering on the edge. Chapter 10. The Reveal. The Truth Unravelled. The morning dawned crisp and clear over Ashwood Manor, the first unclouded sky since the murder. Hercule Poirot had called the suspects to the drawing-room once more. The hour set for 10. The fire burned low, its embers glowing faintly as the group assembled, their faces drawn tight with anticipation. Inspector Japp stood by the window, his arms crossed, a wary respect in his stance. Lord Percival sat heavily in an armchair, his cigar unlit. Clara perched on the settee, her shawl clutched like armour. Dr. Hargreaves leaned against the bookshelf, his hands in his pockets. Miss Violet Grayson stood by the piano, her posture stiff but steady. Poirot entered with quiet purpose, his suit immaculate, his moustache a perfect curve. He carried no props this time, neither letter nor clasp, only the weight of his presence. He stopped before the hearth, clasping his hands behind his back. "Mes amis," he began, his voice a soft blade. "The moment has come. Lady Elellanena Ashwood was murdered, her bridge destroyed, and a secret buried, or so the killer hoped. But the truth, it does not stay silent. It speaks through the little grey cells." Percival shifted, his jaw tight. "Say it then. Who's the bastard?" Poirot's eyes glinted. "Patience, monsieur. First, the how." He paced a step. "The night was stormy, oui? Lady Elellanena left the manor. Rattled," said the maid. She crossed to the bridge, alone. But someone followed. The door creaked minutes later. A blow fell, precise, from behind. The wrench was thrown, the bridge weakened, and it collapsed. "Plan, not a passion." Japp nodded. "Tate's wrench? No." Poirot cut in, his tone firm. "A distraction. Monsieur Tate was at the inn, seen by many. The wrench, it was taken by one who knew his habits." He turned to the group. "The killer was close enough to struggle. The clasp torn from a shawl scratched the beam. The shawl was missing when we found her." Clara's breath hitched, her fingers tightening. "A shawl! Anyone could lose." "Oui, madame," Poirot said, "but not anyone's matches this." He faced Violet. "Mademoiselle Grayson, you saw her leave. You spoke of her shawl in the wind, but you did not say it was yours." Violet's hands dropped too, her sides, her face paling. "Mine?" she said, her voice steady but thin. "I don't." "You do," Poirot interrupted, his gaze piercing. "The clasp, silver, engraved with R. For Rose, your middle name, non. Ellen confirmed it this morning. Your shawl lost that night. It caught on the beam as you struck her." The room froze. Percival leapt up, his voice booming. "The governess? Absurd." "Non, monsieur," Poirot said, unflinching. "Logical." He turned to Japp. "Inspector? The scuff mark. Small. Fine. Her boots, sturdy, but narrow, fitted. And the pylon, weakened by a tool. She had access to Tate's chest, teaching the children near the site." Violet stepped back, her eyes darting. "This is madness. I cared for her." "Cared, perhaps," Poirot said, his tone softening, "but hated too." He faced the group. "The letter, R for Rose, a past buried. Lady Elellanena spoke of a promise broken," Madame Clara said. Dr. Hargreaves noted her restlessness. "Letters unsettled her. Mademoiselle Grayson, you knew her secret." Hargreaves frowned. "What secret?" Poirot's voice grew grave. "Years ago, Lady Elellanena dismissed a maid, Violet's mother. A promise of support, broken. The family fell to ruin. The mother died in poverty. Violet came here under a new name to teach and to wait." Violet's composure cracked, her voice rising. "You can't prove." "I can," Poirot said, calm as stone. "The letter, you wrote it, demanding payment. She refused. You followed her that night, took Tate's wrench, struck her. Then you weakened the pylon. A hammer from the chest, I suspect, knowing the storm would finish it. The bridge, her pride, would fall with her." Clara gasped, tears spilling. "Why? Revenge," Poirot said, "and shame." The past clawed up, as the letter promised. He turned to Violet. "You threw the wrench, but the shawl betrayed you. The clasp, your mother's none, tore free in her grasp." Violet's hands trembled, her eyes blazing. "She deserved it," she spat, the mask slipping. "She let us starve, laughed when I begged years ago. I made her pay." Jap lunged forward, seizing her arm. "That's enough. You're under arrest." Violet wrenched free for a moment, her voice a snarl. "The bridge was her lie. I buried it." Jap tightened his grip, dragging her toward the door as she glared at Poirot. Percival sank back, his face ashen. "My God!" "Clara?" sobbed into her shawl. Hargreaves stared, his hands falling limp. Poirot watched Violet go, his expression solemn. "The mind, it twists," he said softly. "Revenge, it builds no bridges." Jap returned, wiping his brow. "Neat work, Poirot. How'd you know?" "The clasp," Poirot said, "and the order. Chaos hides nothing from the grey cells." He retrieved his cane, smoothing his moustache. "The case, it is closed." The room emptied slowly, the weight of truth settling like dust. Outside the bridge stood silent, its ruin a testament to a buried past. Unearthed, Chapter 11. Outcome and Justice. The dust settles. The morning after Violet Grayson's arrest stretched long and quiet over Ashwood Manor, the air cleansed by a night of steady rain. The broken bridge glistened under the sun, its iron bones slick with dew, a silent monument to the chaos it had witnessed. Inside, the drawing-room felt hollow, its occupants diminished by truth and exhaustion. Hercule Poirot stood by the window, his hands clasped behind his back, his gaze fixed on the cliffs beyond. The silver-topped cane rested against the sill, its gleam muted in the soft light. Inspector Japp entered, his boots scuffing the rug, a faint weariness in his stride. "She's at the station," he said, dropping into an armchair. "Confessed. It all, every word you said, right down to the hammer on the pylon. Stubborn one, though. Won't say she's sorry." Poirot turned, his green eyes steady. "Regret, Inspector, is not her nature. Revenge, it hardens the heart." He smoothed his moustache with a delicate touch. "She planned well, no? The wrench to mislead, the bridge to bury her shame. But the clasp, it was her undoing." Jappo nodded, pulling out his notebook one last time. "Aye, that and your blasted grey cells. I'd have hung it on Tate and called it a day. How'd you spot her?" "The order," Poirot said simply. "The shawl was missing, yet the clasp remained. The letter, R for Rose, fit too neatly with her past, and the boots, small, precise, like the scuff. The mind, it sees when, the eyes do not." Japp grunted, a half-smile tugging at his lips. "You're a queer one, Poirot, but I'll give you this. You're thorough." He rose, tucking the notebook away. "Court'll sort her out. Life in prison, I reckon. Maybe the noose, if the judge is hard." Poirot's expression flickered, a shadow of distaste crossing his face. "Justice, it must be done. But the noose, it is not for me to choose, Inspector. I find the truth. The law decides the rest." The door creaked open, and Lord Percival stepped in, his face haggard, his usual bluster gone. "It's over, then?" he asked, his voice rough. "Mother's killer caught?" "Oui, monsieur," Poirot said, inclining his head. "Mademoiselle Grayson, she bore a grudge older than you knew. Your mother's promise, broken long ago, sowed the seed." Percival sank into a chair, rubbing his temples. "I never knew about the maid, her mother. Mother kept it quiet. Damn fool pride." He looked up, his eyes hollow. "Thank you, Poirot. I misjudged you." Poirot waved a hand. "It is nothing, monsieur. The truth, it is its own reward." He paused, then added, "The bridge, will you rebuild?" Percival shook his head. "No, let it rot. It's cursed." Her dream turned to dust. He rose abruptly, striding out, the door slamming behind him. Clara appeared next, her steps hesitant, her shawl trailing. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice fragile, "I can't believe it. Violet of all people. She seemed so gentle." "Gentle, oui," Poirot said, his tone soft. "But beneath the storm, the past, it twists even the kindest hearts, madam." He offered a small bow. "You will heal in time." She nodded, tears brimming, and slipped away. Dr. Hargreaves lingered in the hall, watching her go, then approached. "Poirot." "Clever work," he said, his voice low. "I didn't see it. Her anger. Should have, perhaps." "You saw what she wished, Doctor," Poirot replied. "The mask, it was well made, but the little grey cells, they pierce such disguises." Hargreaves gave a curt nod, then left, his footsteps fading down the corridor. The manor settled into a heavy silence, broken only by the distant clatter of servants clearing the breakfast trays. Poirot retrieved his cane, turning to Japp. "My work here, it is done, Inspector. The train to London, it leaves at noon, no?" Japp checked his watch. "Aye, you've an hour. I'll drive you. Least I can do." He hesitated, then added, "You're sure she acted alone? No accomplice?" "Certain," Poirot said, tapping his cane against the floor. "The plan, it was hers, personal, precise. The bridge fell by her hand, as did Lady Elellanena." He moved to the door, pausing to glance back at the room. A pity, though. Such a mind turned to ruin. Outside the car waited, its engine rumbling. Poirot stepped onto the lawn, the damp grass brushing his shoes. He stopped by the bridge one last time, his gaze tracing its twisted remains. The blood-stained plank was gone, taken as evidence, but the scratch on the beam remained, a silent witness to the struggle. Japp joined him, hands in his pockets. "What now, Poirot? Back to your quiet life?" "Quiet?" Poirot chuckled, a rare warmth in the sound. "No, Inspector. The world, it is never quiet for Hercule Poirot. There are always puzzles, always minds to unravel." He turned, his cane swinging lightly. "But first, a cup of tisane, I think. The soul, it must be soothed." They climbed into the car, the manor receding in the mirror as they wound down the path. Poirot leaned back, his eyes half closed, a faint smile on his lips. "The human heart," he murmured, "it builds bridges and breaks them. A mystery, even to itself." The cliffs faded into the distance, and the train whistle sounded faintly ahead. At Ashwood Manor, the drawing-room stood empty, the fire cold. A single petal from a rose, left by Violet in the garden, drifted across the floor, carried by a draught, until it settled in the shadows.